Today we're going to be working on a 1999 Chevy Silverado 1500. The brakes were making a little bit of a grinding noise when the brakes were applied. Best indicator of this would be worn out brake pads. We're going to go ahead and replace the rotor and the pads today on both sides. The parts we're going to be using today are from AutoZone. Picked this up a set of Duralast pads and rotors. Honestly, anywhere you can get rotors from any parts store that's fitting your budget or your preference is fine. We picked these up because they were pretty friendly to our wallet. Doing brakes on every vehicle is different, and in the Chevy, particularly, we have Torx bits. The torque can easily strip, so I like to hit it a couple times. Usually it'll break free. You just want to be really careful not to strip out the top of the bolt, or you can also leave the bolt okay. Sometimes you'll just strip out the very edge right here. It's never fun. So remove these bolts. Let's get them pulled out. Once the bolts are removed, the caliper might have to be squeezed a little bit or wiggled, depending. Sometimes you can use a screwdriver, or if you have enough brute strength, you can just kind of wiggle it where it's at, and it should pop free. You see here I got the C-clamp. I had to compress the caliper just a tad to get it off, because it wasn't coming off. Part of this was because it was wore out so much from there really not being any pad material on there, so he had grooves, and that's why it wouldn't slide off pretty easy. Once the caliper's off, you want to tie this up. There's usually plenty of places to hang from. We see we just got some wire here in the fender. Alright. That pad is gone. There is nothing there. So there's supposed to be some friction material on that. The only friction material you see there is metal. So the grinding we were getting was a metal on metal. There's a little bit of the pad left here on this side. Some of this I want to leave in real time, just so you can see how long it can take to get these stupid things out sometimes. It's not always easy, and it does take a little bit of work. That side had a little bit more left on it, but not much.
Almost a third out of space.
So the next step we're going to want to do, if we were just doing pads only, you wouldn't have to go this far. The next step is to remove the caliper mounting bracket. So to get the rotor off, this has to be removed. This will be on pretty much any brakes you do. Some may be different. If you have a good set of air tools, it'll make your life a lot easier. However, this can be accomplished with hand tools and a good bit of muscle. Once that's off, some brake rotors you'll notice will have just small little retainers, and it's just a little flat washer nut looking thing. And so, best to beat these off. after whapping it a couple times with our soft rubber mallet, we were able to pop off the old rotor. You'll see the grooves in it, and it's trash. So we're going to chuck this. Before you go to install your new rotor, you'll want to take a quick look at your wheel bearing and your hub assembly, especially if the CV boot on this model. Please check if it's ripped or torn, but since it looked good, we just left it alone. Installing a lug nut on one of the front studs like you see here will keep the rotor straight instead of falling off, and then it'll make it a lot easier to put the bracket on. Now there's essentially two ways you can put brake pads back on. I'm going to show you the first way that you can go. Sometimes it can end up being a lot harder. Here you see the old brake pad versus the brand new brake pad. Yeah, the old one was pretty much toast.
I wish that was in film.
This is going to be about the first method we can try, and it's mounting the bracket. Let's apply some grease. That way the brake pads have something to slide on. They don't have to slide that far, but that initial setting of the brakes will help have a little bit of grease. Just need a little bit, it'll help get them on. This way we're going to do it is we're putting the bracket on first and then the brake pads. And I want you to see how long it takes me to get these on this way. Now I'm going to show you the other way that we're going to put on the brake pads, and that's to put it inside the pad mounting bracket first. And this way you can kind of finesse each one in as long as you keep a space for the rotor, and then you simply slide it in. One thing to make your life a lot easier is to get these big C-clamp vice grips. We picked a setup at Harbor Freight for relatively cheap, and it gets the job done. You see here we're working with a dual piston caliper, so if you push one side down, it tends to push the other side up. If you can get one further enough down, or have the other one to squeeze down at the same time, you can generally get them both. Make a note that when you're compressing the caliper piston, it tends to force the fluid in the master cylinder to come up, so leave the lid on the master cylinder open so brake fluid can spray everywhere. I'm just kidding. You will want it open though. And be prepared for any that might overflow, because it can happen. Once the caliper is compressed, go ahead and fit it back on the brake rotor. The next thing that we're going to be doing is apply a little bit of grease to the pins. The grease is going to help ensure a little bit of preventative maintenance, especially in the case of pulling the pins out next time. The grease will help keep the water out, which will prevent the rust. After those have been greased up, it's time to tighten them back up. And you'll want to start all your bolts by hand and then get them snugged up with any kind of ratchet that you have. The manufacturer does have a torque specification for these bolts. The T55 bolt that we have here is recommended for about 38 foot-pounds. Or if you don't have a torque wrench, it's best to, on any brakes like these, snug up as tight as you can. I usually like to install the tire with one of the studs straight up and down. You want to install all the lugs by hand, and then you can continue to tighten them with the air impact, or if you don't have one of those, just with the normal tire iron or wrench and socket, whatever you have. Once the lugs are installed and tightened up, you'll want to tighten them the rest of the way in a star or crisscross pattern, which is why I usually have one stud at the top to mark as my number 1 and to continue from there. Once the truck's back on the ground, after any time you do brakes, you'll want to get in the vehicle and you want to pump the brakes. And this will squeeze those calipers, or else you might have a surprise when you start to back out of the driveway. Here's all the tools that we use today to do our brakes. They're pretty inexpensive, but they were able to get the job done. All the sizes of the sockets that we used are going to be in the description. If you plan on doing brakes in the near future, good luck. Hopefully this video has helped you out. Thanks for watching.